Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Rinelli Agustina and I'm from 6th grade. Okay, now I wanted to describe about definition and purpose about narrative research, also types of narrative research. Okay, first is definition and purpose of narrative research. Narrative comes from the word to narrate, which means to tell a story in detail. Narrative research is a specific type of qualitative design in the form of narrative in detailing individual experience or sequence of events in detail. Research describes the life of individuals, collecting and retelling stories about the lives of others in narrative form. According to Kimberly Asner-Solf, 2011, is the study of an individual life is told through the stories of their experience, including discussion about the meaning of experience to individuals. I also got reference from Connelly and Clendenin, 1990, and Gay, 2012, said that in narrative research, researchers collect data in the form of stories, told by the subject of the study and write it into narrative form. Narrative research has the following objective or purpose. First is provide regularity to the chronological story, making it easier for researchers to explain object. Second, narrow and focus the discussion both on personal or personality and social like cultural experience. Third is clarify the meaning of the story spoken by the research of subject. Next, invite readers to justify the ideas studied by researchers. And the last, invite the reader to make a change. Next is types of narrative research. First, autobiography is a curriculum vitae written by the researcher himself, in other words, writing his own life. Is a curriculum vitae written by the researcher himself, in other words, writing his own life history. Second is biography. Biography is a form of narrative that contains important experience or achievement of others. Usually, biographies feature famous figures or people who have played a big role in the lives of many people. Third is life history. Is the whole life experience of a person, like an important event in one's life. This is in the form of document that used to introduce themselves or give an idea of self. The fourth is personal account. Is a personal record, can also be referred to as a diary. The contents can be filled in according to their respective wishes. It usually contains interesting event experience. Okay, 5. An interview is a conversation between two or more people to obtain information. This activity is in the form of verbal questioning between the source and the interviewer. The information that has been obtained is expressed in the form of writing or recording, audio or visual. 6 is autoethnography. Is a way of writing or collecting data in a social research. According Hyewon Chang, 2008, autoethnography writing is a writing that plays emphasis in the research process. Okay, basically, autoethnography is a research method that focuses on itself, on the author's own life story according to the timelines. Okay, next, personal documents are documents that are stored using archival systems such as birth certificate, diplomas, family cards, land certificates, and marriage book. Okay, the last is personal history is a record of chronology of the past about yourself. Okay, that's all from me. Thank you for attention. And the next material will be continued by Nirmala Amir. Time is yours.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I am the second speaker. Will tell you about narrative analysis and narrative research process. Narrative analysis refers to a cluster of analytic methods for interpreting text or visual data that have a storied form. A common assumption of narrative methods is that people tell story to help organize and make sense of their lives, and their storied accounts are functional and purposeful. Different approaches to narrative analysis are categorized on basis of whether they focus on the narrative content or structure, with the semantic version interrogating what a story is about, while the structural version asks how story is composed to achieve particular communicative aims. That basic typology, according to Reisman 2008, one could also add the dialogue performance narrative analysis, which focus on the context and view of narratives as being multi-voice and on construct and the visual, which links words and image in current narrative. Research uses narrative analysis to understand how research participants construct story and narrative from their own personal experience. That means there is a dual layer of interpreting in narrative analysis. Next, narrative research process. Narrative research is a term that subsumes a group of approaches that in turn rely on the written or spoken words or visual representation of individuals. This approach typically focuses on the lives of individuals as told through their own stories. In basic linear approach, the encompasses the study of the experience of a single individual, embracing stories of the life and exploring the learned significance of those individual experience. However, in most cases, one will be creating an aggregate of narratives each being on the others. Narrative research is set out by the validation of the audience. It is useful part of the social science investigation, but may not always stand alone for evidence and support the conclusion report. A number of data collection methods can be used as the researcher and the research subjects work together in this collaborative dialogic relationship. Data can be in the form of field notes, journal records, interview transcript, one's own and on other observations. To the list, one should add audio-video recordings, as these are also useful data in narrative research. Maybe that's all from me. Next will be explained by the next speaker. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Nirmala Amir as the third speaker, and on this occasion I will describe the key characteristic of narrative research and narrative research techniques material. Okay, the first material is the key characteristic of narrative research. Narrative research can be characterized by the following elements. The first is a focus on the experiences of individuals. The second is a concern with the chronology of individuals' experiences. The third is a focus on the construction of life stories based on data collected through interviews. The fourth is restoring as a technique for constructing the narrative account. Next is inclusion of context and place in the story. The next is a collaborative approach that involves the researcher and the participant in the negotiation of the final text. And the last element is a narrative constructed around the question, and then what happened. The narrative research process is similar to the construction of a biography in that the educational researcher does not have direct access to observational data, but must rely on primary data sources, example, the participation's recollections, and secondary sources, example, written documents by the participant. Data are collected primarily through interviews and written exchanges. As mentioned previously, narrative research placed considerable emphasis on the collaborative construction of the written account, the narrative text. Although researchers using other styles of on-site research may share accounts with the research participants as a way to test the trustworthiness of those accounts, they placed little emphasis on the restoring process that is quite unique to narrative research. Okay, the next material is narrative research technique. Empirical data are central to narrative research in spite of the inevitable interpretation that occurs during the data collection process, example, during the telling and restoring activities. However, interpretation does not mean that the outcome of the process is fiction. The narrative researcher, like researchers using other on-site research approaches, must be prepared to use multiple data sources to contract challenge that narrative could be written without ever leaving home. Accordingly, Clendenin and Connolly recommended that data be in the form of filed notes on shared research of experiences. These experiences occur as the researcher collects data through journal and letter writing and documents such as lesson plans and class newsletters. The immensity of the writing text for the narrative researcher becomes clear if you consider what is involved for both the researcher and the participant in living the story. The main challenge involves the participant abilities to live their lives while telling their stories. Okay, I think enough from me. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Well, my name is Muhammad Yusril Al-Farid, and I'll explain about destroying and oral history. Well, first, destroying. A characteristic of narrative research that distinguishes it from other on-site research approaches in the technique of destroying the stories that individuals tell about their life experience. According to Creswell, destroying is the process in which the researcher gathers stories, analyzing them for the key elements of the story: time, place, plot, and scenes, and then rewrites the stories to place in the chronological sequence. 10 often, individuals share stories about their experience with researchers, but without attention to the real-time order of events. For example, participants may share specific detail of the vacation in a somewhat random sequence, backtracking to fill in earlier omissions, or jumping forward as contains detail of the event. Call to mind other related events, feeling you about this trip to makes me think of the ones we took last year when the bear showed up. With each interview, the researcher records the recollections, missing many pages of notes, which serve as the raw data for the narrative account. Although the notes contains many interesting stories and detail, They do not constitute a narrative account of the participants' experience because they lack chronological and coherence. The researchers must go through the process of destroying to provide the coherence. The destroying process has three steps. The first step, the researchers conduct the interview and transcribe the audio tape to provide a written record of the raw data from the interview. This process involves noting not just the spoken words but also the nouns of the interview. For example, humor, laughter, anger, and so on. The second step, the researcher transcribes the data based on the key elements are identified in the story. For example, suppose that Hilda describes how she copes with students who came to class under the influence of drugs. From her comments, we may identify and highlight contain themes such as seeking assistance from a school nurse or counselor and establishing individual educational plans and constructs. And the third step, the researcher organized the story into a chronological sequence with attention to may be set in the context of her classroom with the adolescents who use drugs and may be focused on the actions of the students. The problems caused by the actions and any resolutions to problems that Hilda employed. After the destroying is complete, the researcher invites the participants to collaborate on the final narrative of the individual experience. For example, the educational researchers and Hilda would collaboratively construct a narrative and describe Hilda's experience working with adolescents drug user as well as the meaning this experience has for Hilda. This collaboration between researcher and participants is critical to ensure that there is no gap between the narrative told and narrative report. 12.1 test of the trustworthiness of the narrative account is the participants' validations that the account is representative of the individual's lived experience. As related in the interview, a filed and clear narrative should increase our collective understanding of the phenomena under study. In Hilda's case, how a teacher confronts and deals with the adolescent drug user in the classroom. The next, oral history. One method for cheating field text is to have participants share their oral histories. An oral history may be obtained by the researcher during a structured interview scheduled with the predetermined questions, or thought an open-ended approach in which the researcher asks participants to tell their own history in their own ways. In instructing an oral history, a researcher may ask the participant to create a timeline, also known as a chronicle, that is divided into segments of significant events or memories. An oral history of a teacher working with adolescents who use drugs, for example, may include a timeline for the beginning of the year that indicates significant events related to students' drug use. such as when the students were suspended from school because they violate zero tolerance policy, or when the students were arrested from dark positions. The timeline is a helpful tool for the narrative researcher attempting to make sense of the importance of these events in the teacher's overall story. The teacher may also be asked to expand on the significance event and write a description in journal together. The chronicle and journal of the teacher experience provide the narrative research with a powerful descriptive tool. Well, maybe that's all that I could explain. Thank you.